So, hello again. We're here now to discuss the waltz. But first of all, we thought you might like to know a little of the history of the waltz. Well, it arrived in England in 1812 from France, and it was the most popular dance of the 19th century. During the early part of the 19th century, it produced two kinds of waltz: the quick waltz, which they called the Viennese waltz, and the slow waltz, which was called the French waltz. The quick waltz, or Viennese waltz, produced lots of leaping and springing, and the French waltz had deliberately slow, languid movements with a sentimental note that we know so well today.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to discuss the first major heading in the waltz, identification. What I'd like to talk about are music, the four working joints, resistance, and the understanding of the double thrust. What we'd like to do in this first part of this videotape is to look at the classical steps of the waltz, these being the natural turn, the reverse turn, the whisk, the chassé, the double reverse spin, and the open impetus turn. But first of all, I'd like to talk about the musicality side, the difference in the driving action of the waltz compared to the slow foxtrot. If we first of all just identify what happens in the slow foxtrot, I'll just pull back a little bit to show you. If we take the slow foxtrot classical step, which is the feather step, from here, I've got my preparation step here. Now I'm going to be driving for 1.5 beats. We all know that the first step is a slow, which is 4 half beats. So in a slow we have 2 quicks, 2 beats, 4 half beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. The actual drive time is for 3 of those. We're driving 1, 2, 3, collecting for 4. So just identifying the classical drive step, slow foxtrot, is 3 half beats. Okay, moving on to the waltz now to show a comparison. When you take the half beat timings, we have 6 half beats in a bar of music. 3 beats to the bar, 6 half beats. Clear? Okay, so when we take our preparation step from the previous bar, we've got 3. Now from here, this first drive is 1 beat. You've got the half beat before and the half beat in front. So to clarify that musically, you've got 3, now the drive starts, and 1. So you've got a 1 beat drive. Just to make that clear once more, you've got 3 is the initial setup, the preparation for the drive. Now you've got the full drive action, and 1. Now becomes very interesting is the side lateral swing, the unique swing of the waltz. Now that is 1.5 beats duration. Half a bar of music just to do the side swing. This is where the beauty of the waltz comes in. So you've got your preparation step, you've got half a beat, 3 and 1. Now from here you've got 2 and 3 and. So as you can see there, you've got the full 1.5 beat drive. Once more, just for clarification, 3 and 1. That's the drive step. Now from here, half, 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 finished, and of course 3 and 4 collection. As you can see, there's quite a contrast in the classical drive step of a slow foxtrot compared with waltz. Anna and myself have taken quite some time out to study and to really understand what is the classical step of the waltz compared to the slow foxtrot. As I've just shown you, there is some considerable difference, and we advise you take the time and effort to study these classical steps, because through your routines, through your programs of steps, these base steps will be coming into their own. And a little later in the tape, we'll be discussing the more advanced steps and to show you where these classical driving steps come into their action. I'd like to move on to the next subject here, which is we call the 4 working joints. These are the joints that actually propel the body across the floor. I'll identify them first. They're the hip, the knees, the ankles, and the toes. They all have their own job, but they're all part of the unit for their drive. So, starting off with our natural turn again, one of the classical steps. From here, a weight on our right foot. We're compressing our knee forward, which is changing our poise to transfer to the new standing leg. This is where the drive comes in. So you've got 3 as a time factor. You're driving your weight, so you've got your foot on the floor, you're driving the knee forward, the hip is taking control to the knee, the ankle is flexing, and when the step is finished, we've got the toe for the fullness of drive. So you've got hip to knee to ankle, and finishing off the step, you've got the usage of the toe. It's important to coordinate the 4 working joints of the body. It gives you the maximum opportunity. I get asked questions many times, how can we produce big movement? How is it possible to swing further and further and further? When we discussed in our introduction tape, we talked about the importance of posture and poise. Now, this is very important in the swinging aspect. From here, we must have good posture, good poise, must be aware of this. The poise is changing, and then we're getting ready for this large drive. It also must be timed as well. If it's too quick or it's too slow, it won't be coordinated with the music. We must be aware of this drive, the 4 working joints, hip, going into knee, going into the ankle, and the foot is finishing and concluding the fullness of the drive. So we've got our first drive finished. From here, we need to continue usage of the knees, usage of the hips, the ankles, and the toes. Fulfill that through. Very important aspects to consider. Other aspect to produce what is classified as big movement is resistance. Very important. You've got 2 aspects of resistance here. You've got the standing leg and you've got the moving leg. Just make that clear. You've got the standing leg and the moving leg. Just to identify and show you this again, putting my center onto my foot. This is my new standing leg. That is the resistance, so that I can propel my body across the leg. You probably remember before we talked about the metronomic action. This is where the foot is in position and we're actually driving our body across the floor. If there is no resistance to the floor, it's very difficult to drive. You'll have a short action. So you need the left foot in position to be able to drive your weight across there. Very important. One other item to be aware of is the resistance in the moving foot. The resistance in the moving foot. If there is no resistance there, the swing pace comes across too quickly, and you can't produce the full, voluminous drive action that we require. So it's a skill factor again, so it's something that has to be practiced. So you've got your weight on the foot, moving to the new leg, connection with the left foot to the floor, and resistance as you're driving through to produce the action. Very important thing to consider. Going on to the last of the subjects, that we're going to discuss within this figure is the double thrust. What is meant by the double thrust? Again, it's assisting in the fullness of drive, the thing that we're always after and we're always pursuing, trying to develop within our dancing, is the fullness of action. You also need here the double thrust. What is meant by this is as I've identified the resistance to the floor. Now, from the hip is actually going to allow the knee to be moving forwards, so you need the thrusting of the hip forwards to finish that swing. Now, very important, the second thrust coming through from the right side to finish the swing. So you've got left hip thrust and right hip thrust. Gives you the maximum possible drive. So those are the four aspects relative to this action. What I'd like to do now, I'd like to call Anne onto the floor, and maybe she can discuss the important aspects relative to the lady's action in this first step, being the natural turn. So Anne, would you like to discuss your particular actions?
So, if we first take the subject of the 4 working joints, as John mentioned for the man. Well, it's very important for the lady to use her 4 working joints in order to be able to maintain and mirror the movements that are being produced by the man. So perhaps if I just turn to the side for a moment, and I'm just going to show you exactly what's going to happen. If I take a step backwards on the first step of a natural turn, I'm going to be using, firstly, the knee moving forward over my supporting foot, which in this case is my right foot. So I'm going to drive the knee forward over my supporting foot, as you can see, and at the same time I'm going to be using the foot, and here I'd like to just bring in the point John made about the forces, the 2 forces being resistance and propulsion. So the resistance I have here is in my foot to the floor, and we can also call that inertia, and the propulsion being that of the body. So my thigh muscle here is propelling me backwards whilst the foot is giving me the resistance. So if I just show you what's going to happen, the knee's going forward, the foot is giving me resistance, and the thigh is giving me propulsion. So if we just do that one more time, sending the knee forward, using the foot, and propelling the body backwards from the thigh. And there's one important point I would like to make here. It's a fairly common mistake seen at all levels of dancing, and that is that lady dancers tend to forget about using their supporting leg, and they very often move their shoulder weight backwards before they have initiated an action from their standing leg. Now, what this tends to do is it pulls the centre of gravity away from the supporting leg much too early. And therefore, we are forced to use our swinging leg at a much too early stage in this action. So I'm going to show you this in an incorrect way now. So if I move my shoulder weight back too quickly, as you can see, my swinging leg has had to move into position very early, and my centre of gravity is falling away from my supporting leg. So what is the principle here? Well, the principle is for me to drive my centre of gravity from my supporting leg to my new swinging leg, and then of course will become my new supporting leg. So if I repeat that once again, the principle for both lady and man is to drive their centre of gravity from their supporting leg to their swinging leg, and then that will become their new supporting leg. And of course, that will repeat itself through every step that we dance, but I think the most profound and clear action is seen in the first step of the natural turn. So if we just repeat that once again, I'm using my supporting leg here now. And of course, as I arrive onto the left foot, I'm going to be using an equal amount of pressure through the foot, using the knee and driving away from that position by using foot pressure, which is, as we said, retardation, and of course using the thigh to propel myself into the side swing. So that brings us to another point that I would like to make regarding the 4 joints. And what I would like to now discuss is the action of the foot and ankle, particularly for the lady. So I think we should just perhaps go back a little, first of all, to an early stage of our dancing where we're taught how to use the foot, particularly the ball of foot, when we commence a step. So if I now concentrate on my right foot, I'm going to start by taking a step, and as you can see, I'm using the ball of the foot now, and as the foot extends in front of the body, it would become a heel. And if I now take that as a backward step on my left foot, I'd start with the ball of the foot underneath my body, and it would extend backwards to become a toe. So I'll just turn around there, and you can see I have flexion underneath my body through my ankle, and as the foot moves away from the body, it now becomes extension. So we're looking at 2 actions there. One is called flexion and the other is called extension. And these actions will happen when I'm moving either forwards or I'm moving backwards. So I think now we should come to the point that I believe many people are quite confused about, and that is the usage of the inside edge of foot. Now, it has been a long belief in the history of dancing that our body weight is consistently carried through the inside edge of our foot. And whilst I believe that there is pressure felt through the inside of the foot if our posture and balance is good, I also believe that it is a mistake to have too much pressure to the inside edge of the foot, because it restricts us from using the whole foot in a natural way. And if we're using our body weight correctly, then we should feel pressure through the whole of our foot when we are moving either forwards or backwards. I think the main emphasis of an inside edge of foot action comes when we're taking a side step, such as that on the second step of a natural turn. So if you look at my right foot now, as you can see, I'm clearly using an inside edge of foot for a side step. And as the body weight is transferred onto the right foot, my left foot will now become an inside edge as it's drawing to the closing action. So we'll just repeat that and clarify it once again. On forward or backward movements, we have flexion and extension of the foot and ankle using the whole foot. And a side action is where we're using the inside edge of the foot and then extending to the whole foot. This way, the ladies will show a beautiful, clear action through their feet and ankles, and it's a very desirable attribute to see when watching good lady dancers. So I think really that concludes what we should talk about as the lady. And I think now John and I would like to show you some of the, again, the classical steps.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, what we'd like to do for you now, we would like to actually dance some of the classical steps of the waltz with the music. in our waltz videotape, looking at the classical steps. We've just danced a series of classical steps, and what I've done, I've chosen 4 of those steps. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to be discussing one key point to each of one of those steps. So the 4 steps that I've chosen are, first of all, the whisk, which I will be discussing the double thrust. The second figure is the chassé, and I'll be discussing the 4 working joints. We're moving on then to the double reverse spin, and we'll be discussing resistance. And then the open impetus turn, and we'll be discussing timing. So let's take those figures one at a time. Let's talk about the whisk. I'll show you the pattern of the step, and we'll be discussing the main feature, the main important feature, which is the double thrust. So dancing it from here, I'm dancing first step left foot forward, right foot to the side, left foot crossing behind right foot, and it is finished. So relative to the double thrust, I feel the double thrust is the main feature of the step. From standing with your weight on the right foot, I'm actually driving forward to the left foot. From here, you need the continuous drive from left to the right. So you've got this second thrust action. So you've got a very unique situation of a forward drive and a sidewards drive. So I'll just show you once more. You've got a forward drive and a side drive. I'll show you that again. A forward drive and a side drive. Okay, the next step, talking about the chassé. The chassé, want to talk about the 4 joints. We'll finish it off from the whisk. From here, you've got the drive of the hip, which is going to flex the knee, collecting in the ankle, and you need the toe, is the 4th working joint, to thrust the body forwards. Very important feature with the chassé for the propulsion across the floor, and also to be able to keep on time. So you've finished your whisk, you need the hip usage going through to the knee, the ankle collection, and finally that toe to finalize action across the floor.
So the first step I've chosen is the reverse turn, and we're going to be talking about thrust. The second step is the whisk, and I shall be discussing the joints. The third step, the chassé, and I'll be talking about timing. So let's first of all take the reverse turn. Well, in the first step of the reverse turn, we don't have thrust. So I'd like to come in where we take the second step, and of course this is a very good example as lady. So I've moved backwards, moving diagonally, backing diagonally to centre, and I'm now coming into the second step. So from here, I'm going to be using very positively my right hip and also using the thigh of my right leg to propel me into the side step. So as well as having hip usage and of course the thigh usage, I should be using resistance through my foot at the same time. But the main action here we're discussing is the hip. So that will bring me into the side swing, and as you can see, by using the right buttock here, I'm giving myself a very positive shape and line, so therefore I'm enhancing the side swing. So I'll just do that for you once again, counting it, and 1 and 2 and 3 and. So now let's talk about the whisk, and we're going to talk about the joints. In particular here, the action on the first step is very important regarding the knee action and also the thigh action, because we'll be going backwards. So once again, I'm just going to show you the action a little more clearly. So as I take the first step backwards into the whisk, I shall be driving my left knee forward over the supporting foot and using the thigh to propel myself backwards, driving the centre of gravity onto my new standing leg, which will be the right foot. Now from here, the joints that come into action are again the thigh, the knee, and I'm using the ankle very strongly to put myself up onto the ball of the left foot. So there's a lot of resistance and foot pressure going on through the right foot at this moment to put me onto the left foot. So there I'm going up onto the left foot, and the last action we're going to talk about is the usage of the ankle and toe on the right foot moving behind left foot into the whisk position. So as you can see there, we've got extended feet and ankles into the whisk action. So the whisk itself is a very simple step, but it has great beauty in the way the feet and ankles are used, and it really is a feature of this step. So now let's look at the chassé and the timing. In particular, I would like to highlight the and beat of 1, which I believe to be exceptionally important in the chassé as lady. So if we go from the promenade position, perhaps if we take the whisk as the entry, from the end of the whisk, 3 and, I shall be moving onto my left foot for 1. And this is the action I believe to be very important here. There's a softening of the hip on and, the left hip we're talking about now, and putting me back into a closed position. And I will be assisted here by the action of the man's right hip at the same time, giving me the encouragement and of course the lead to do this. So if I just show you once again, we have 1 and putting me back into a closed position, 2 and 3. So a very common fault I see with lady dancers is that from the beat 1, they don't dance the action of and fully, and therefore continue to move their body weight past the left foot and making it exceptionally difficult to recover a central or centered position with their partner. So here is an example where timing can correct your technical errors. And it's one point that I believe we should all be very aware of. And of course, not just in the chassé, but in all promenade positions, we should be aware of the timing of recovery to a normal position.
What I'd like to do now, I'd like to bring Anne onto the floor, and I'll dance with Anne these 4 figures that have been under discussion. Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to dance the whisk and the chassé combined together. Just like to show you at a different angle. Now I'd like to show you, and if you can concentrate on the feet so we can discuss the driving action. We again show you the same thing at another angle. Oh. Third item, the double reverse spin. Now from here, foot resistance, I believe, is to be one of the key elements. Of course, the other three elements are an integral part of the step, but I believe the foot resistance is very important. So I'll just show you the double reverse spin. If you could actually concentrate on my feet at the moment, you can see what's happening here as we're going through from right to the left, and you can actually see this foot resistance. You need this resistance of the foot to enable it to be finished. So I'll just dance it once more. And foot resistance, foot resistance. You need this resistance. One of the reasons that resistance is required is because of the driving force forwards. If you drive and don't have the resistance, you will actually go tumbling over. So you need this resistance of the foot to control it. You need that resistance to control it. Okay, going on now to the open impetus turn, which is the fourth step under discussion. Timing is a very important thing here. Basically, is because we've got a large contrast of inside and outside of turn. Gentleman is going backwards, he's on the inside of the turn. Lady is going forwards, she's on the outside of turn. So if I'm dancing an impetus from here, I want to be aware of the half beats. So from here I've got 1, collecting for and 2, rising for and, stepping for 3, collecting for and. Just do that once more. So we've got 1 as a step, turning, closing, rising, stepping, lowering. If you remember each of those sequences, you've got something to do on each half beat. You've got 6 half beats and you've got 6 things to do. Very important feature here. You've got a step, you've got a turn, a close, a rise, a step and a lower.
And lastly, we should talk about the double reverse spin, and in particular we're going to talk about resistance and propulsion. So if we enter into the first step of the double reverse spin, we are dancing a left turn, and it's because we're on the inside of this turn, it's very important that the supporting leg puts us to the inside of turn. So we are not just moving backwards in a straight line, something of this nature. If I were to do this, I would make it very difficult for John to rotate around me. So therefore, the purpose of my supporting leg in this particular case is doing 2 things. It's moving me backwards, as I just showed you there, and at the same time, it is helping me to rotate through my shoulders and hips to go to the inside of turn. So I'm moving away from the line of John's swing path coming forward, allowing him to turn around me. And that is vital to the end product of the step and the way we can accomplish it. So if we do that once again, use the supporting leg to drive you backwards and turn you to the centre of the turn.
The thing we discussed was the double reverse spin. Again, concentrate on the feet and you can see the foot resistance. As you can see, it's imperative that you have the resistance to enable it to happen. Once more on the feet. And the last figure that I discussed was the impetus turn. I would like to dance that for you. 6 features to do. Good, okay, and once more. Okay, thank you very much. So that concludes the 1-point aspect of the classical figures for myself.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the conclusion on this section talking about the classical figures. So it now leads us on to the next section where we'll be discussing advanced figures and looking at the subjects of centering, shoulder swing and the forces.
In this new section of advanced figures, the first figure under consideration will be the hinge, the pivot and the Rudolph. I think first of all we would like to dance the step for you with the music. So you've just seen the figure in this particular section, the hinge, the pivot and the Rudolph. I'd like to discuss some of the important features of the figure relative to centering, shoulder swing and the forces. Going into the actual hinge from here, this position, I'm feeling very important my center is angled towards my partner at all times. It's very easy for the gentleman to overturn his center too quickly, so I'm monitoring my lady's center as I'm actually going into the hinge line. Okay, that's the first point. As I'm coming out of the hinge line, the first type of energy that's going to be used is the actual shoulder swing. I'm monitoring the lady's swing of their arms, I'm blending with her. Once this has been completed, I then incorporate the standing leg and thrust my center forwards to go into the pivot. So I'm going into the pivot. Very important point at this particular time is that the shoulder, the hip, the knee and the standing foot are completely lined up. You're completely lined up on one foot because the next drive action into the Rudolph is crucial. So from this position again here we've got shoulder swing into this position here, crucial position to be aligned up one vertical center. Once that has been achieved, you can then use the standing leg to thrust the center onto the new standing leg, which will be the right foot, incorporating also shoulder swing. Very important action because the lady has the Rudolph action. I'll just go through it slowly once more. Centering to lady, into the line, and from here shoulder swing, driving from the leg, collection onto the left, driving into the Rudolph, and from here we can recover back into a slip pivot, rotating the shoulders. I'd like to dance this with Anne slowly again so you can analyze exactly what is happening. So with Anne. So monitoring her center here, going into the line and finished. Rotating the shoulders, blending with her first, driving forward, collecting and driving forward once more. Very important action there. Would you like to comment with the ladies' center whilst we're doing this particular figure?
So let's now look at the ladies' action, the centering, in the hinge line. So if I go from the entry into the hinge At this moment, I'll be moving forwards, going on the outside of turn, so the direction of my centre here will be moving more or less forward on the initial part of this action. So I'm moving forwards on the outside of turn. Now what's happening here at this moment, I'm very conscious of what is happening to the man's centre, because I'm now going to be rotating positively around my left foot, going into the side action of the hinge. So there at this moment, I'm now conscious of where my partner is. I'll just turn around there so you can see what's happening. I'm very conscious of the man's centre. So now I have my 4 blocks of weight lined up over my left foot, and I now put the line into position. Now what happens here is that the area of the body that is most conscious of following the man is, of course, the centre of the body, because that tells me how I can distribute the rotation of the blocks above it. So wherever my centre is at this moment, I can now from here distribute the rotation through the shoulders and then consequently through the head. So if I now bring my arms down by my side and I turn my head and shoulders back to a neutral position, if you can see there from the side, my spine is still in a vertical position. So I think we should just make sure, again, from the centre, we then rotate the shoulders and then rotate the head. So we have a constant line coming from the centre of my body, which of course is connected strongly to John's centre. So it's our common centre there that makes the line.
The next figure we'd like to discuss is a beautiful little figure, starting to become a popular figure, and it's called the Little Gem. Just to identify the figure, what we'd like to do, we'd like to dance it for you, showing the main body and then concentrating on the feet. We'll show it to you in 2 angle positions as well. So first of all, with the music, we'd like to dance for you the Little Gem. Well, did you like the Little Gem? We hope you did. We'd like to talk about one very important aspect with regard to the Little Gem that can either make the figure or break the figure. It's called centering. Throughout this figure, the gentleman especially must be angling his center constantly towards the lady. On the back lock position, not so bad. You can do this quite easily. The difficulty is when we come to this next part, in the incorrect way, the bad way, gentleman overturns. So he must be angling towards his lady throughout here, and as he comes into the next part, he still must be angling towards, and especially here. So he needs to feel that the right hip is settling back, so he's still angled towards the lady. A very thin approach to it is a good aspect to think about, and then he's coming out, he's still angling towards his lady, and then he opens to promenade position. So in a nutshell, the key factor is centering throughout. Some parts are not as difficult as others, but throughout the whole part of the figure you must be angled towards and angled towards again and again and again. In the learning process for this figure, it's sometimes a good idea for the lady actually to hold your hips. I'll just show you with my partner Anne. If she actually holds my hips here, this is always a good practice exercise, so I'm keeping my center towards the lady, I'm keeping towards her whilst I'm going through. I'll just show you that in the backward action. So I'm keeping my center towards my lady, keeping it towards, and keeping it towards. Now, I'll just show you once more, and you can actually concentrate on the foot patterns now. So from here, looking at the feet, you can see as they take their shape, the feet are allowing the center to be maintained into position. I do believe that the lady has the same thought process while she's dancing this figure.
Well, yes, of course, as John mentioned here, that centering for the lady has great importance because it allows us to accomplish the step with great clarity, not only in our movements together, but also through line. So perhaps if we just for a moment move from the lock step that we started with, so we've got 1 and 2, and we're now going into the action where we move outside partner for 3 and. Now it's particularly here at this moment as I move outside partner that I think we should concentrate on this section for a moment. So what I'm going to be doing from my supporting leg is rotating my centre very strongly towards my partner, but making sure I don't over-rotate my shoulders towards him. So what I have here is an action where I'm actually producing torsion. In other words, my centre is moving towards my partner and my shoulders and head are moving in the opposite direction. So if I just show you that facing the camera, the centre's moving towards partner and you can see my head and shoulders are moving in the opposite direction. So what this does to partner, by allowing the shoulders and head to turn in the opposite direction, it strengthens my angle of centre towards him and it gives him a very positive feel of line coming from the midline of the body right through to the head. And it's this position here, when I move outside, that gives him great security now to move to promenade position. So I'm going to finish my line moving forward there, complete the movement of the 4 blocks of weight over my left foot, and I allow him to lead me to promenade position, and I can go into that as slowly as I wish. So I would say the key factor here is the outside partner movement going into the actual centre of the gem itself, and there after that the movement is more or less taking care of itself because the position is good, and then the lead of the man to promenade position will put us in the right place.
The next figure that we thought you might enjoy and you would like to see is called the back check. We've just danced before the little gem, and the natural follow-on from that is the reverse weave going into the back check. The two particular principles that we'll be discussing with regard to this figure will be shoulder rotation and the forces. But first of all, we would like to dance the figure for you with the music. Well, the back check, an interesting little figure, but it has a degree of difficulty that has to be considered. I'll first of all go through the weave to give you the opportunity to be able to control the back check, and then I want to talk about the forces involved with the back check and the shoulder swing. So first of all, going back into the weave action, I'm starting in a promenade position from here. Must be aware of centre to lady, but very important from here is the shoulder swing coming into play now. I'm keeping the shoulders back. Now from this position, it's the hip that's very important. The hip is collecting the weight, going into the knee and to the standing foot. And I've got a very strong force action from the left foot going back into the check. So it's 1, 2. So you've got a double kind of switching action. If I do the switch in front of the camera now, as you're coming back into the weave, you've got the switch back to the left, and you're changing strongly to the right. One of the tricks of the step is to stay low. It's very easy to go too high, too early. So going into that weave, we're low into the step, stay low, and then you can grow out of the step and conclude the step with a pivot action, as we said before. But the energy source must be kept low and feeling of the collection of the weight from the right, feeling the foot pressures lifting you, but not actually rising. That's the difficulty. You need that energy, but you don't need it to go too high. So you need that energy, but it needs to be low and compressed forwards. That's the secret. You've also got a switching action with the shoulders. So we're feeling we're going in again, and you're going to switch and rotate. The step has a high degree of difficulty attached to it, but we feel it's worthwhile persevering with it because it has a tremendous beauty within the figure, and it is typically characteristic of the waltz. I'd just like to dance it with and for you, without the music, just to illustrate the features that I've pointed out within the figure. So from here, checking back, being aware, and then you can go forwards into the figure. Just dance it again from this position here. And we're checking and checking to the figure. Okay, would Anne like to comment on any of the points?
So I would now like to discuss a couple of points regarding this lovely back check. So the 2 points that John mentioned were the shoulder swing and the forces. So if I start from the promenade position that we had at the very beginning, I'll just move back a little here. So the first thing that we have to consider here as we move into the promenade position is that the man here has centripetal force because he's on the inside of the turn, so he has centripetal force. And I'm on the outside of the turn, so I have rather a difficult job here because I have to follow the speed and rotation of his movement on the inside. So I have a very positive shoulder swing. So as I move my body weight onto my left foot from here now, the next part of the action commences through the shoulder swing and the arm swing. You can see that there. It's my shoulders and arms that are leading my body into the next step that moves around him, going onto the right foot. So once I've found my body weight on the left foot, I'm then using the shoulders and arms, commencing the action, so it's starting really from the top of the body and the lower half of the body is following, which then takes me into that step moving around him for the weave. Now the next thing we're going to do here is to move outside partner. So once again, as with the little gem, the centre here has great importance, and we should be thinking about that all the time as we go into the outside partner movement. And I expect you can see there the same principle comes in again, centre moving towards partner, and the shoulders and head are rotating away from that. So he has a very secure feeling of body line here. The next thing that will happen, we're going to repeat an action that we did earlier at the beginning of the weave. The arms and upper body will commence this action. So we're looking at shoulder swing again, coming into this action, and what will happen is I will then use later into this action, once the shoulders have finished their movement, my left foot will then move into position. So just to clarify that, once again here, from the outside partner movement, the action starts in the upper part of the body, and then I move forward onto the left foot. And the finishing action here of this line is that centre again moves positively to partner, and I'm allowing the shoulders and the upper body to distribute the turn from there. So I expect you'll remember when we did the hinge line, the ladies' action once again commenced from centre, and the turn was allowed to spiral at the top. So we have the same type of action here, and it might help you to know that a lot of the line steps are a development of this. So if we just do that once again, and you can see what happens, there's the centre, and what I'm going to do now is to increase the shoulder turn and of course allow the head to consequentially finish the line. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time now that we conclude this waltz tape. But before we do, I'd like to give you a little reminder of, at the beginning of the tape, we talked about the waltz coming to England in 1812 from France. Well, I believe that the waltz of today that we all dance looks a little different to what I'm sure it looked in those days. But the lovely thing is that we've all managed to maintain the basic classical steps within our dance, as well as showing the new advanced figures, which also give it its beauty and its romantic look. So we hope that when you're constructing your choreography, you'll always keep that in mind. So for now, it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from me.
You are my dream of life, my everyday night. Whatever I should do, I do it just for you. The only time I'm calm is when I'm in your arms, and all I want to do is dance the tango with you. And when I hold you close to me, my heart beats like a rhapsody. It's like a love.
大家好，谢谢您继续观赏我们的高级探戈。在这一集。